Excellent. Thanks to everyone for attending. Particular thanks to our new early review team. I don't know if anybody's actually here from it, but we had a slight change of process this week with new UMIPs going through the discourse first for early review and then on to the GitHub. And we have a new early review team who's going to give some support and feedback to new UMIP writers, so that the UMIPs going into the GitHub are well formed and that the review in the GitHub acts as a last check. So this is quite a new process, but if you would remind people as well about the process change, that would be great. Now, we have 6 pull requests that are up for consideration, but 3 of them are actually resubmissions. They're contracts that, they're UMIPs that extend the DVM to support additional contracts. And they're waiting on the contracts being deployed, which should have happened this week, but because of the gas price issue, they didn't actually get deployed. So they're just going in next time, but they're ready to go. So we don't need to consider pull request 248, 290, or 291. So the first one that we do need to consider is pull request 277. I'll just bring it up. Oh, I don't have that one there. Collateral types that have been included have changed a little bit, and it's now BANT, vBANT, band, SDT, keeper, cream, chain, and earn. I know that John DePanchu have had some good feedback from our early stage reviewers. There was a couple of small issues that I saw. There was an issue with a contract address and a couple of bits of missing info. Anybody want to talk to the Omnibus one? John?
Yep, I can speak to that one. So this was just wrapping up a collection of interesting looking ERC20s. We removed a couple that we did get some feedback on because they were at least mildly controversial. The only mildly controversial one that seems to have supporters is sand. So that might come in later as its own separate considered thing. BNT and vBNT, I forgot to add those until today, so I just added them in. But we also have price identifiers up for that. So that should look familiar to anybody that's looking at this round of UMIPs. And yeah, otherwise I added a lot of details about how the tokens work and information about their trading markets and current distribution, partly based on the feedback from the early stage reviewers.
Cool.
I had a bit of a question around how we deal with final fees given market action we've seen in the last couple of weeks, right? So pretty much all of the final fees listed here are now like either like $100 too low or like in some cases like half what they need to be. So is our sentiment like with this kind of thing that we maybe take an average, or do we need them to be at minimum $400 at time of vote? Like how do we respond to this kind of thing?
I think that's a really good question. I'm inclined to just set it at like $400 at the time of vote, which might mean bumping up the final fee. And I guess time of vote is more like time of roughly when this gets merged in. So a little bit before the vote, but curious about other people's thoughts.
I mean, personally, I think that it's riskier to have too low of a final fee than too high of a final fee, right? Of course, there's some balance there, but yeah, I would just err on the side of going a little bit higher than $400, especially in the current market climate.
And the other thing is, a lot of these final fees, like some of them had even like 2 decimal places. Like, I think it's easier to reason about if these are whole numbers. I mean, obviously, if it's like BTC, it's different, right? But, you know, if a final fee is like 1.65 Keeper tokens, like, might as well just make it 2, right? I don't know. It just seems like the final fee and the $400 number is quite arbitrary, right? At the end of the day, like there are good reasons for it, but like $400 was kind of a calculation we made like a year ago. So yeah, maybe let's also try and keep them like relatively round, just so it's more consistent. We don't have like lots of decimal places all over the place.
There was a discussion around final fees. John, I think you chipped into that with Matt and David, because the fee setting is really to stop people spamming the DVM with spurious price requests. And we talked a little bit about like alternative ways to value it, especially seeing as given that a lot of our final fees are a bit odd now, either too high or too low. Maybe it's something that I know Hexie and John were looking at the security implications around non-traded tokens. And maybe that's a general bit of work that really needs looked at as an entire issue.
Yeah, I agree. I think for this UMIP, we can just go with like, let's set a conservative high mark, but we need to have a way of, I don't know, like making sure that the final fee is serving its purpose with like a minimum of hassle, and also keeping all of these different collateral types up to date with their final fees, which I know Sean did recently, but maybe we're due for another round now after last week.
Yeah,
but that's a broader issue. Yeah.
So I think a UPP for next week is a good idea to update all of the final fees. And for right now, like I think it's an interesting problem to think about how we can have more dynamic final fees. But yeah, it's not something that we have for this week, right?
And I guess for this Omnibus UMIP, are the main concerns around the final fees and then potentially a contract address issue? I'm looking to see which one had a contract address issue.
Renus, I think you picked up a contract address issue.
Yeah, I think it was just the Etherscan link for vBNT. It was the same as BNT, but that's, I think, simple one to fix.
Yep, let me go fix that one.
Okay. I don't think there's any others there. So that's good to go, just with a bit of a review of final fees and checking the contract address. Everyone happy with that?
Yep.
Cool. Excellent. Now the next one is UMA in space, the SpaceX launch as a supported price identifier. There were quite a few comments left on this one. I seem to have lost it now. 295. And I think it was Hexie that commented that you might need to be a rocket scientist to actually properly evaluate this, which was kind of what I felt as well when I was reviewing it. I didn't really know, like, is a space station, if you dock at a space station in Earth's orbit, is that an Earth? And things like that. We do have someone from the SpaceX team.
Yeah, it's actually Opium team.
Oh, the Opium team. Okay. Do you want to talk to the price identifier?
Can you repeat, please? I didn't get it.
Can I do what?
Oh, just like talk about the price identifier.
Yeah. So basically, we were initially thinking about giving the way to push the results of the SpaceX launches on chain. And initially we were focusing on the rideshare program by SpaceX, which only happened once so far, but is planning to happen more and more in the future, especially this summer. And the idea was to create insurance for these shared launches of the payload to the space. But then while we were describing basically the price identifier, we came up with an idea to use the this ancillary data and to make it more generalized. So the requester of this price identifier could pass basically the parameters or like the definition of which exactly launches is this request about. So I think from the comments which we received on this UMIP is clear that we were not clear on some naming of the parameters, especially the weight, because I assume everyone was thinking that weight is basically the weight of the rocket itself or the payload, but we were considering it more like the parameter of the importance of this launch in the overall success rate calculation. So it was like more mathematical weight than physical. And I think we should specify that explicitly. Yeah, and probably some other clarifications where we didn't just met the, I would say, formatting of the UMIPs. Yeah, if you have any like specific questions, I can answer them.
Yeah, I had a question regarding timing. It was not quite clear. Where's the cutoff time as a request timing, or whenever there is a dispute? Because what is the intention for this product when we are voters are supposed to be evaluating whether or not it's successful or no?
Yeah, initially we added actually two more parameters, which were like start and the end of observation period. But then with the comments from Sean, we removed that, considering that every request is basically requesting the data in the period of like infinitely in the past and until the date of the request. So particularly whenever is asked in ancillary data, should be answered in the range like until right now, until the request was made.
Okay, then I think it's just a language issue, making a bit more explicit that it's the way it is. Because in other UMIPs it was a bit more explicit. So yeah, that's good.
I think a couple of other things that people brought up, and also I think it's worth noting here that this identifier is not intended to be used by like the EMP or any registered financial contract. So I'm not like super sure about all of the specifications of the opium contract, but it's possible that there isn't even like some sort of dispute process and only like, you know, settlement price requests. But yeah, I think people also brought up just like wanting some definition around how the weights are decided, since those like right now seem entirely arbitrary. And then also, I think the like buckets of prices, the 0, I forget what it is, 0, 1, or 2. I think those could use some more clarification, just around like what the criteria for each price or each bucket is.
Yeah, regarding the determination of the weights, I think this is really important for the ones who are requesting the data, because they can specify with these weights how important this particular launch is for them. And this could be tuned. For example, if we will be able to make an insurance contract for one shared ride share and, for example, 2 more normal launches of with the Starlink satellites, we could like specify that the one with the ride share is much more important, for example, and has weight 2, and the rest of them has weight have weight 1. Something like this.
Gotcha. So it's kind of like a contract, like a buyer beware on like the contract side of things.
Yeah.
Of thing.
And regarding the status determination, we also didn't want to overcomplicate the things, because we could, of course, come up with the, I don't know, some wider range of the possible values, like 0.1, 0.2, and so on. But we tried to separate it as with as high as possible, I would say, abstraction, so we can say that it was launched and it reached the attitude that was requested by the mission, basically, because each mission has some attitude. For example, launching of the Starship should go to particular attitude, just turn around and go back. So this is a success for like executing the mission in the atmosphere or space. And yeah, for the payload rockets, for example, it's crucial to just get to the orbit, for example, and it's already considered as a successful launch, I would say. So that was the idea behind it.
One thing that wasn't clear to me from this, and maybe warrants a bit more explanation, is the structure of the ancillary data that you're feeding into the request. So we haven't really had many, like actually any projects really take advantage of the ancillary data like this with the optimistic oracle before. So structuring that and maybe putting some examples together of how you're expecting it to be configured would be useful also in review, because you say here like the ancillary data would consist of a list of launches where each launch is described by a bunch of parameters. So we need to like understand like the encoding of that, for example. So the ancillary data is like a bytes 32 field with like a max length of like 8,000 plus minus chars in it. So yeah, I think an example of what that ancillary data and like how that's expected to be decoded would also be quite useful.
Yeah, okay, clear.
And also regarding application or potential use of this contract, what is like expected lifetime for this potential insurance product? Because I'm not yet sure what's the lifetime when naming of the missions are fixed, because at least currently I checked this next upcoming missions, and some of them didn't have yet like uniquely identifiable names. So is this accessible, this information sufficiently in advance so that it could be like set up in these contracts who would then require these price requests?
Yeah, we're considering, I think, the ones that are more or less determined or could be identified by the naming. For example, the ride shares are called transmission dash something, so the number of the mission, and the Starlink they all call Starlink dash something. So it's like more or less standardized, I would say. But regarding the timing, this could be an issue, and this already happened. We were closely watching the transmission one, the first rideshare mission, and initially it was planned for the end of December or middle of December, but at the end it happened only at 21st of January. So yeah, in the process of the design of this insurance, we would consider these buffers, of course, in order to catch the potential delays.
What do people feel is the best way of handling it here on in? I think there's been a number of issues identified. I mean, this is quite an unusual identifier. It's one using auxiliary data, which is quite new, but we're quite excited by it. I like the idea of a space identifier. How should we take it forward to make sure that the auxiliary data is correct and that we're a bit more precise with what exactly is being measured? Ali?
Sorry, I think I didn't get the question.
I was just wondering what you felt the best way forward was, whether to take it back and kind of go with the engineers to look at ancillary data and the structuring of it, or if we should hold off for a week and it would be ready. I'm just not very sure whether how much change would be required.
I think they are pretty done. The only thing that Chris mentioned, we should probably specify more examples how like the already encoded ancillary data will look like, and then how it should be processed and be decoded. But this is not a big effort to do. So I think and the JSON itself, which is described there already, is pretty obvious, I assume.
Yeah, I also think it might be nice to see the OPM contracts. I mean, not that I think that is a blocker or anything for the UMIP itself. Just, you know, like, as I said before, this is the first time we've used the optimistic oracle to serve an external product or external financial contract that isn't like an internal thing. Other scenarios like this have always involved like creating registered financial factories and financial contract factories. So I don't know what you guys think about just linking it, right? Like maybe a link to the repo where the thing that's consuming the data is, right? Just for completeness, and just for general curiosity purposes around the UMIP. It might also be useful.
Yeah, agree. I will add it. Thanks. Definitely.
Sure.
It's kind of interesting though, because you technically don't even need a financial contract, right? Like I could just want to get the price of SPACEXLAUNCH.
Yeah, it's pretty cool to think to structure it like that. Maybe we'll see some use cases where it's like a manual click here to request kind of thing, and I don't know, it informs like a governance in another protocol without any contracts. But Ali, also we can talk on Discord around the structure, and I can help you with that if there's any questions, and we can sync up as well separately.
Cool, thank you.
Okay, so shall we put that in for a delay for another week to clarify? Oops.
I don't think it's, personally, I don't think it's necessary to delay. Like everything that's been talked about is just like clarification questions. But
okay, so
that's just my opinion.
Go this week?
I think so, yeah.
What
do other people think?
What?
Yeah, I agree. Like contingent on all the outstanding clarifications being done and like the stuff we've discussed now, I think it should be fine if we can get that stuff in the next couple of days. So yeah, contingent go.
I think another like kind of cool meta point around this, since it is like a new type of like a new scenario that we haven't really dealt with before, is like these types of price identifiers kind of require like there's a lot less security concern around these, right? Because they're not going to be used in our financial contracts, then we don't need to like consider as many things, I guess.
Yeah. Another question I had, which I don't think it was in the UMIP, but maybe I didn't see it. But part of the way the optimistic oracle is designed is this concept of putting up a bond. So or like a reward for the person who proposes the price request, and a bond that they need to put up that they would lose if they were wrong in their proposal. Was that mentioned in the UMIP anyway?
No, I think it was abstracted from this completely.
Right. So that might also be something to consider, right? Because like if you want third-party people to be proposing stuff on this, we might want to include the bonding information. And obviously, like, we run a bunch of proposer bots, well, one proposer bot that services like all these price identifiers. So we wouldn't be able to like propose on this because it's not like a standard price feed, right? So you would need to like have someone manually add price information into the optimistic oracle for those proposals, unless you wanted it to be automated, in which case, yeah, that's a whole nother discussion. But yeah, we do have infrastructure there in our mono repo that you can take a look at if you want to see how to set that up.
But how would that look like if there is a dispute and this is brought to DVM, like for voters? Who would be then paying this final fee in this case? From which source? If there is no like registered contracts in UMA.
So the optimistic oracle is the registered contract in optimistic oracle disputes. And the way that final fees work with optimistic oracle disputes is a bit different to normal final fees. Basically, it's up to the DVM's discretion to ensure that the final fee was paid for the disputed identifier. So when a price request gets sent from the optimistic oracle to the DVM, we append the address of who did the request to the optimistic oracle onto that request. So at the voter level, you can see this financial contract requested a price from the optimistic oracle, which was then disputed and sent to the DVM. So the voters can then choose like conditionally to not service that request if final fees haven't been paid.
Yeah.
So it's yeah.
Yes, but can like this requester know what should be the amount of these fees if it's not set in advance? How it is it predictable? Like whether or not these voters will deem this fee appropriate?
So I think, and please someone else correct me if I'm wrong here, but my understanding is that right now the internal opinion on this is like it costs nothing, assuming it's not being abused, right? So as long as there's not like abuse happening on it, like it's kind of in like a trial mode, and therefore like that fee will be zero. And only if there's like massive TVL or like really like whack stuff happening on the identifier, it will be free, basically, is my current understanding. Sean, have you got any more color to add on that?
Yeah, I think that's true, especially for like eventual regular fees, where DVM voters could choose to stop returning prices for contracts that aren't paying regular fees and have some sort of notable TVL.
Yes, but from the perspective of a requester, like the contracts who would be like using these insurance contracts would be using these requests, how they can be sure that this fee that they pay is actually at the end of the day considered appropriate, because it's like fluctuate. It's not set in stone. So is this security for them sufficient?
So I think like that's a great question, right? And the way we've really structured the optimistic oracle, at least in the beginning, is not to worry about fees too much, right? Like final fees and regular fees, right now we don't charge any regular fees. Like in the final fee, it's quite complicated for contracts to implement this if you don't necessarily like build from fees first. So I think in general, the assumption must just be that the DVM will service it fully, assuming you don't abuse the DVM. And until we've got like a more clear pattern on going forward, like I do think you raise a very valid point. There's a scenario where like the DVM could hold the financial contract ransom, or basically, right, like demand higher fees paid. But I think the likelihood of that happening, right, like the optics of that is definitely more costly than the fees that the DVM could extract, right? So I think it's fair to assume that like it's free from that perspective, assuming you don't abuse the system.
Great questions, Rainus.
Are we good then with the two contingencies that were previously identified, which is the clarifications on auxiliary data and also information on the proposer bond? Oops. Excellent. Okay, that's good to go then, contingent on those. The last one was USD BANT and BANT vBANT. These are price identifiers. Chandler, you've been working with Stephen Fox on this. Do you want to speak to this price identifier?
Yeah, sure. So it's BNT, not BANT. So the purpose of this UMIP is to create price identifiers for USD BNT and BNT vBNT, with the purpose of it being to create call options from the Bancor team. So the Bancor team is here as well. So Stephen and Mark are from the Bancor team, so can kind of help field some of the questions. Looking through the kind of comments on the implementation, I think a few clarifications are pretty apparent. And the first was just around the whether to take the inverse or the USD BNT or the inverse of each of them. I wasn't 100% sure which way the script was doing it, but after just doing a double check, we can just quickly flip those around to make it a lot more sense. For it to make a lot more sense. So I think that's going to be quite an easy one to change. The other comment was just around how this UMIP was slightly structured, and that being that it was is that the most liquidity for BNT is actually on their own Bancor protocol, and our price feeds don't actually reference those right now. So kind of the route that I took with writing this UMIP was just to have the team write a script that you can put in a timestamp, and you can put in a timestamp, and you'd be able to get the two relevant prices, and this will come into play for when the call options expire. So that's kind of the route that I took, and Anu actually added in a point saying that if we were going to use the USD BNT price, that we could actually use CryptoWatch for a series of medianized price feeds. So for this UMIP, I kind of went down the route of leaning on the script specifically for the call option, while also including a USD BNT price identifier.
Thanks, Chandler. Yeah, the issues that I had seen that were outstanding was this difference between the price feed, which uses centralized markets and a spot price, and the expiry price, which is Bancor pools. Somebody also identified, I don't know if Anu's on the call, because Anu did quite a comprehensive review of that. But he also identified that you needed the vBNT USD price. There were the timestamp was written a bit oddly, and also I think that if you're going to have a difference between the implementation and the price feed, that needs to be specifically addressed in security concerns. Is Anu on the call? No.
I didn't actually see him on there. So the timestamp issue was changed. You can actually use a Unix timestamp now. The Bancor team sent through a new script for that. Then the different approach between the feed and implementation. So for the security concern, it was actually more. It seemed more secure to me to actually use Bancor pools for the call options, since they're the most liquid markets, and a more accurate price can be, we can get a more accurate price from that. And so the script allows for that. One of the things I did highlight in the security considerations is that it's once we can reference Bancor pools in our price feeds, then this UMIP should definitely be updated so that we can reference those in more of a price feed rather than getting a static price.
And for vBNT USD, do we want that price identifier, or that's just a?
Yeah, so I checked with the Bancor team. So Mark, you can actually speak to this, but it's actually going to be vBNT BNT for the call options.
Yeah, correct.
Okay.
So So it would be extremely confusing and unproductive if the call options were denominated in US dollars. Because the system that we're trying to create, and Clayton and Chandler are very familiar with it. But basically, vBNT has a leverage utility on Bancor. vBNT is essentially a derivative of BNT that you can use to take loans on the protocol so you can leverage your liquidity to do extra market activities. vBNT is produced at a rate of 1-to-1 with BNT. But when you swap it for BNT after you've received it, the price that you get back for the vBNT that you swap out is determined by a bonding curve. And so what we've essentially created is a credit system that has no interest and no liquidation threats. And trading out interest rates and liquidation for speculation, we've basically allowed users to to enter into a debt position or a leverage position while essentially short selling their BNT stack. So it's not quite a short sell, but for the purpose of this discussion, it's helpful if you think of it that way. But the price that they're speculating on is entirely on that pool, on that single pair. So they're not really concerned about what the price of vBNT is doing versus the dollar, because that's not the loan that they created. The loan that they created was for BNT. And so if, like we've had this week, for example, if the price of BNT is going down, the price of vBNT comes down with it, exactly 1-to-1. The only thing that changes the price of vBNT is the loan schedule. So as more users are taking loans, the price of vBNT comes down relative to BNT. And as people repay those loans, the price of vBNT comes back up, allowing more people to enter into leverage. So if someone sold their vBNT at a price, at a rate of like 0.3 BNT, then the call option that they would be incentivized to take is anything at 0.3 or above. You can think of it as a stop loss and a short sell. And that's the utility that we're hoping to introduce between our two projects. So yeah, denominating the call option in US dollars would be very difficult because it adds a second layer of speculation on the price of BNT as well. Whereas if it's denominated in BNT, then it's very direct, very exact. Users know exactly what they're buying.
Yep, I think
that's very cool. Sorry, John, after you.
Oh, I was just going to say in terms of like the comments on the UMIP then, so we wouldn't need like a vBNT USD price identifier as well. We're all good.
No, you wouldn't need it. We provided it because it was asked for. At the time we weren't certain exactly what the requirements were for the system, but yeah, there's probably no need to track the price of anything in US dollars.
I want to ask what our opinion is on putting scripts within UMIPs. So this is also something we haven't really seen before necessarily, where it's like a full script for resolution, like at settlement time. So you could argue that a better way to do this would be to submit a pull request into our mono repo. We have like a scripts directory for like just kind of miscellaneous settlement related scripts and like general scripts in general. So you could argue that would be better because it would go through a formal code review. And then we could reference like that sort of canonical script. But I also think there is an argument to leaving it in the UMIP. So I'm kind of curious what like Sean and John, what do you guys think about where the script should reside? Because also we have like, there's like an inferior link in here and there's like a few different like sort of opinionated components. So where do we think this should sit?
I don't know. I think like best case scenario, like having a pull request for an actual price feed would be best. It's also like most reliable from like a proposal perspective.
Yeah, that fits with the normal flow.
Yeah, and everybody could then like run automated proposer bots for this. So even if it's not really a concern, since there's no like liquidation or dispute process beforehand, it would still be better from like a proposal perspective. But also it's like, I don't think that's a super hard requirement, since this should only need to be queried like once. Yeah.
How quickly could we get Bancor's pools into our price feeds?
Not sure.
Yeah, I mean, it's a function of its priority, I guess, right? But it shouldn't be too difficult to do, given like the interfaces are pretty simple, and we've already got like similar feeds. We've got like SushiSwap and Balancer feeds and Uniswap feeds and UniV3 feeds. So I guess it's pretty logical to add it there. We yet to have like an UMIP that specifically wanted liquidity from Bancor just due to like TVL there. But I mean, obviously the BNT tokens, like the vast majority of the liquidity is there. So I guess that isn't an avenue, because if we did it that way, then, you know, it would just simply be like another feed. And then like you were saying, Sean, we could just use the normal scripts and the normal proposal bots would work with that. I don't think that should block this UMIP though, right? Because it's because it's a KPI option, or not a KPI option, because it's an option, right? We don't require any kind of liquidator bots. So yeah, it can go forward with it in the structure, I guess, and optimistically we add it in as a full feed, like you say, Chandler.
Yeah, I ideally want to make it as a standard feed, and then it resolves all of these kind of semantical, which is the better route discussion. So yeah, I guess the question would be, if we go ahead with this route and the UMIP changes post the call options going live, that might affect the actual settlement of the live call options in any, you know, if they get launched using this UMIP. So,
well, it shouldn't actually affect the settlement, right?
No, it won't affect settlement, but I mean, like, if we decide halfway through the call options lifespan to change this UMIP, that UMIP will still have their those call options will still have that UMIP's settlement logic, whereas call options post that will not.
But hold on, we won't change the settlement logic, right? Like, you can't change that mid option life cycle.
No.
Like, it has to be deterministic.
I'm saying if you want to launch more call options post the original call options being launched.
But
I see.
I think the difference is, like, you're not changing what the settlement process is, right? You're just making it more accessible.
Yeah.
So you're still calculating the BNT vBNT BNT price with whatever like TWAP, or I forget the length of the moving average, but like you should just be using that calculation methodology, which is like deterministic, right? You're just making it more accessible.
Yeah, and ideally that should be generalized, right? Like, we don't need to bind it to a specific settlement timestamp either, right? So I mean, I see in this example script there's like 15th of April, but it should be able to work for any like repeat option, just with a new timestamp into the future. Just request the same identifier at a different time. So yeah, I mean, that also leans strongly in the favor of creating a custom feed. And I think just one thing to add on that also, like, our normal pattern with this is like the UMIP authors should create a PR for the protocol repo for that feed. But yeah, it's not a strict requirement, right? Because of the context that we've discussed now.
I do think there's a decent amount of clarification that's needed in the UMIP though. For example, like, if this is going to be used for call options denominated in BNT, I think like the only price identifier that should be proposed is vBNT BNT, which was kind of discussed already, right? Also, in like the implementation, talks about how the script uses a simple moving average, but there isn't like a lot of clarity around like the length of that simple moving average or how to calculate that. And it's good to have it in the script, but I also think it's good to like explain it within the implementation section so anybody can calculate this. Yeah.
Cool. I mean, those seem like somewhat quick edits. It's more taking stuff away as opposed to adding more stuff.
Yeah, I agree. And just one other thing to bring up is, I guess this will change if we're taking out the BNT USD price ID, but just all this stuff around like the CryptoWatch price feed, if that's not being used, I think that can be cut as well.
Yeah, that's fairly obvious as well. All right.
But yeah, sorry, but this timestamp of a request that wouldn't be like hard coded in the UMIP anymore, right?
No, that should be changed.
Okay, good.
That was just like an example, I think, right?
Indeed. But
Yeah.
I'll make that explicitly clear.
Cool.
Sweet.
Okay, so you need a more thorough description from us about the simple moving average. I'll get that.
Cool. Yeah, Mark, you can just post it in our Telegram channel. That should be good.
What I'm hearing from this then is that it's a go, but contingent on removing USD BNT and also possibly removing the price feed from the UMIP and referencing
Sorry,
separate.
I think moving
price
that
feed.
that CryptoWatch price feed is a definite. So I'd make it contingent on that definitely.
So there will be no price feed in the UMIP at all?
No. Just the
Wait,
script.
Okay.
just the script though, right? Just to be clear.
Yeah. So the script's not a price feed. It's just it's to get a price at a point in time.
Okay. And that will be, that's what we're going to move to a separate repository. Chris?
Maybe. I don't think we actually reached consensus on that part.
Okay.
So I think what Chanda was saying is remove the CryptoWatch price feed, but keep the script in the UMIP. And then as a second point, I don't think we've actually reached consensus on whether or not this should be in the UMIP, like the script itself, right? The thing you run. Like I lean quite strongly to saying it should be put in the protocol repo, or at least it should follow the same pattern as everything else, so that it's like as easy as possible for the proposer to do this and for independent verification. But at the same time, like it does feel a bit unnecessary to block the UMIP for that. So I think from my perspective, it's fine. Like assuming you guys can kind of like commit to in the next couple of weeks submitting a PR to the protocol repo to add in this feed so that we can follow our normal pattern. And if you need any help with that, just hit us up on Discord or Telegram, whatever, and we can like show you the process for that. It's not too onerous.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Okay, so what I've got now is a go contingent on removing the USD BNT and possibly move the script to the protocol repo. Not a blocker, but can be performed post-approval. Is everyone happy with that? Any other issues I've missed?
Sounds good, Vari.
Sounds good to me.
Excellent. Well, that was the 3 UMIPs to be discussed today. Is there anything else people want to bring up? How do people feel the new process change has gone?
I mean, I thought today's call was productive, and there were a lot of comments on the UMIPs, and felt like they got some pretty thorough review.
Yeah, I agree with that. It was like really nice to see so much feedback on these UMIPs. Sorry, Clayton.
No, it's cool. Vari, I wanted to ask you, I remember before you mentioned that doing follow-up, chasing people down on contingent UMIPs was quite took a lot of your time. I'm wondering if that's still true.
Not nearly as much. That could be because Sean is efficient. Yeah, we've had less UMIPs for the last few weeks, and more have been carryovers. So it is kind of ping people a little bit, but just checking in where they're at.
Sure.
So
Okay,
it's
cool.
not quite as extensive as before.
Nice.
Excellent. If there's no other comments.
Just one other cheerleading comment, which is it was really cool to have both Bancor and Opium people in here. So thank you guys for joining. That was nice.
Yeah, thank you for having us. I've enjoyed it.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.
Cool. Thanks to everyone for attending.
Thank you all.
Thanks, Barry.
Bye.
Thanks, everyone. Take care.
Bye.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.